No, you know what? I want my ears bleeding. Much better. Hey everyone, how you doing? So, I'm gonna start this video off with an admission of guilt. I was recording a pretty lazy video idea earlier this month, where I was trying to beat Plants vs. Zombies 2 using only Ail-mint family plants. And truth be told, I know my audience pretty well, and I know myself pretty well, so... This was slop. I'm trashing that idea because this one is infinitely more interesting. And the entire idea of this video is centered around one question. Which plant families in PVZ2 solo the adventure mode? It's a deceptive question, honestly. At first, you might immediately jump to a logical conclusion, like Appease-mint can easily win, or I don't know if Enchant-mint has this in the bag, but the more you think on it, and the more that you consider every aspect of the question, the more interesting it gets. I randomly asked myself this question a few weeks ago, and it's lingered a lot in my mind. So that's what I want to discuss in this video. We're just gonna go ahead and hit PVZ2 with a 1-2 punch combo of doing every plant family challenge and seeing whether they can be done or not. Kind of. We'll talk about how I'm putting this together as we dive into the topic, so let's get right into it. Okay, a video of this size probably needs a fair explanation. And you know what? I'm gonna try my best to give my rational thoughts, so let's talk. When I say which plant families in PVZ2 solo the adventure mode, what I mean to say is which ones would do best in a challenge rule set. See, the obvious answers to the initial question are yes and no. Yes, as in, if you level up every plant to mastery and try beating the game, well, of course you're gonna have an easy time. But also, no, as a vast majority of plant families have maybe 3 to 4 plants in the entire adventure mode. And of these, most don't directly attack and therefore probably can't be used to win in conveyor belt levels or locked and loaded levels. And that's assuming that even one plant family appears in every level like that. Simply put, that's not possible. So making this question one which involves a challenge rule set immediately makes things much more interesting to me, as I feel it broadens the possibilities of the question significantly. If you consider this unfair and borderline clickbaity, you already knew the answer when you clicked, be honest. The run would be over in ancient Egypt on the 3rd level for almost every family in the game if you were being strict. And I'll be real with ya, that's boring. We're here to spice things up, and that's where our rules come in. Obviously, if you're using any plant in a given family, naturally every plant of that family is allowed, no matter how game-breaking they are. Levitator, spearmint, Doom-shroom, dare I say solar sage? There's a lot of modern plants that are kind of disgusting, with more being added almost monthly, so this video might be outdated even a year from now, who knows? Also, in case I wasn't clear before, we'll be following the challenge rule set of not letting any levels which choose our seeds for us or conveyor belt levels count. So bosses are out of the equation, same with PVZ3-like levels. Sorry, that was a cheap shot. I also did some thinking on whether Gravebuster should be allowed in Dark Ages or not, because, see, this world is almost a make or break for many families in this game, simply due to how Jester exists and the sun in the sky is completely gone. I decided that no, Grave should stay in his own family just to make things fair, but for Big Wave Beach and Lilypad, yes, allowed, no questions asked. This is a world where Lilypad is absolutely vital to some levels, and that's not really the case for Gravebuster in Dark Ages, which is something I'll explain as the video goes on. Sunbeam is also allowed in Dark Ages Night 14, but we knew that, so yeah. Woo! Basically, I just wanted to make this question as fair as possible for all competitors in it, since 2 families get almost all support plants in the game, which makes things pretty tough on the others. I'll tell you right now that Reinforcement isn't exactly holding out well when they're not giving Gravebuster. And this leads me to how I figured out which families could beat the game. Gonna be completely real for a second here. Do y'all expect me to play the entirety of PVZ2's campaign like 14 times for one video? No, I'm sorry, but even if I love this game, I would rather eat a lunchly and watch Talktua than subject myself to that. That's torture, and a minimum of 100 hours in-game. Minimum. probably a lot more if you're failing on some levels. So here's how I got around this for the video. When it comes to level gimmicks, I'll be transparent. Most of them can be dealt with by at least one plant in each family, except for some of Dark Ages and most of Big Wave Beach. These two worlds are basically the only worlds I've played to gauge how possible it would be for each respective family to solo the game. Modern Day's Day 30 is a level that, while annoying, isn't that difficult, so I didn't really play it, but I assure you, if any family can get past the hardest levels of Big Wave Beach, they can do Day 30. So I recorded footage of my runs for every single family doing these two worlds, and we're gonna go in order of the families listed in the almanac. Alright, a couple more things here. Obviously, no purchasing plant food, no power-ups, no leveling up plants, and you get the idea. I will allow the 8th seed slot to be used in this video, and I have 100 starting sun due to an upgrade that could be purchased a while ago. Also, Pea Shooter's level 2 is unskippable, so it's just here permanently. And as for Iceberg Lettuce, I'm not sure why it's level 3 to be honest. If that single-handedly makes Winter-mint ineligible for the video, I apologize, but we're gonna roll with it. So, let's start with the first family here. Well, we're starting off strong now, aren't we? Like I said before, this was the family I was working on a video for, and if you look at the plants involved for even just a second, yeah, it's not hard to see why I called that video idea slop. In case it wasn't obvious, we have a few MVPs in this family that immediately shine, especially for Dark Ages. When you're limited to 100 starting sun, you don't really have a whole lot of room for error. Unless you have a plant like Puff-shroom, then you're fine. This family also has a direct counter to Jesters with Doom-shroom, and not to mention one of the most broken plants in the game, Nightcap. Oh, and there's Skirty-shroom too. Yeah, this family is kind of busted, and I've already played through half of the game with them, so yeah. But that doesn't exactly tell us if they'd win in Dark Ages and Big Wave Beach at all, even if it seems like it'd be easy. There's simply too much to consider in both worlds for us to make an outright claim, so let's discuss these individually. Starting with Dark Ages, I immediately had to develop a strategy for sun management, since some levels don't give you any at all, and others give, well, not a whole lot, admittedly. So the key plants for this world end up being the freebies or the ones that don't cost much at all. Kinda. Luckily for the Ail-mint family, they happen to have Puff-shroom, Skirty-shroom, and Impair, 3 plants that are not only cost-effective, but are also really strong in their own rights. And that's not to mention Ail-mint itself, which is one of the mints in the entire game, since it poisons literally every single zombie on the board when it's placed. Fair and balanced. Dark Ages didn't really have any difficult levels, they were more so annoying for the most part. Even the ones with no sun given at all were pretty straightforward. So, what about Big Wave Beach? Well, about a year ago, I would have said this world is impossible. Then Sea-shroom got added, and Nightcap. Oh boy, let's talk about these two. Because I cut the video I was making on this family completely, I ended up cutting my explanations on most plants too, so let's make up for that here and now. Nightcap is broken. This plant nullifies, and is not limited to dealing with, the following gimmicks. Blizzards, ambushes, jesters, octo-zombies, fisherman zombies, and much, much more. To say that Nightcap is basically a ghost that attacks zombies wouldn't be very far off, let me just say. With that, I think you can begin to understand that Big Wave Beach isn't a hard world to get through as long as I stall, which is only doubled by the just as spammable cousin of Puff-shroom, Sea-shroom. This one's actually stronger, by the way. When you use the plant food, it multiplies like a lily pad. Oh my god. I would talk about all of the hardships this world brings, but I don't think that's a necessary conversation when it comes to this family. Every level was very possible, and very easy once you get the momentum down. Even levels like Day 30 were a cakewalk. After you organize your lawn. Yeah, apparently the hooks still technically connect here. Oops. But even still, the Ail-mint family can solo PVZ2, and honestly, you could probably do this world without lily pads too. So yeah, easy win. This was the most interesting footage I got from the run. Oh, this audio goes hard. So, initial observations with this family are pretty rough. Like I mentioned before, the 100 starting sun that I'm given is essentially the make or break of the entire challenge in Dark Ages, and there's only 2 plants in this family that can actually use that sun. Pea shooter and tumbleweed. I don't like our odds here. We still have Appease-mint to use, but even that plant is a bit risky for full waves, so I don't think it'll be given much of a chance to shine. But with that being said, we should still try to do this, right? This was one of the runs that I did end up streaming, and it went about how you expected it would. The first couple of levels are easy enough, but when you get into level 3 and you have no sun producers, yeah, it's kind of over. It's a big shame too, because tumbleweeds actually don't trigger Jester's reflecting ability, and there's a bunch of ways for this plant family to be used in Big Wave Beach too. Even still, there isn't a chance in hell that this family would ever beat the game, which is sadly the case for our next family here too. Be honest, did you think this family had a chance either? I didn't think so. Even ignoring the fact that your choice of plants are basically either cabbage or kernel, Arma-mint itself isn't even that strong. It does enough damage to hurt a buckethead zombie, but not kill. And honestly, that's a really big shame. Needless to say, this family lost before they even started. Rest in peace. Now this is an interesting family. I knew going into this that, to a certain extent, this family always has a chance at victory. Even ignoring Dark Ages, there's genuinely just enough variety in the family to get by in last stand levels and all that good stuff. I mean, Boom Balloon Flower exists. And honestly, I respect this plant a lot more after using it for the video. It's a pretty fun plant to use. This family also has yet another incredibly broken mint, Bombard-mint itself. While it's a purely RNG based fella, it can still dish out a ton of damage, more than enough to make a Garg look weak, which is pretty disgusting honestly. So I managed my expectations with this family despite all the good signs, and decided to try level 3 of Dark Ages first. And unbelievably, Lady Luck was on our side, and the level is possible, which is a pretty massive achievement for any plant family in the game. I went back and did the first couple of levels with the family too, and eventually I got to the second level in the world that doesn't give you any sun.
Oh no!
I played this level a lot, and unfortunately, I think this is the run under. This level's RNG is just insane. You need to get lucky in several different ways before you even get a chance to win. The game simply doesn't give you enough plant food to cheese the entire thing with Bombard-mint. And of the plants that you can place, Explode-nut is really the only viable choice, and sadly that doesn't pan out very well. Big bummer. This family is a really unique case. I wish it worked better, because it honestly deserves to work better. It's just not possible to beat Dark Ages with it, so sadly we'll have to move on. Well now, things are looking up here, aren't they? This family is one of the most unique in the entirety of Plants vs. Zombies 2, since it not only has its own sub-producer, Moonflower, but it also has one of the most varied selections of plants in the entire roster too. Dusklobber, Nightshade, Dragonbrute, Gloomvine, I could go on. And that's without mentioning the mint, which is arguably one of the better mints in the game too, since it essentially drags like 11 zombies to the Shadow Realm. That's pretty busted, come on now. So yeah, my expectations going into these two worlds were overall pretty high for this family. And Dark Ages started out pretty good, which surprises a total of 0 people on the planet. I don't think it's shocking that the one other plant family to have a sun producer besides Enlighten-mint ends up working well. But despite this, I had to change up my strategy pretty often for the world, since most of the good shadow plants use projectiles, and a certain Jester isn't a fan of that. Okay, fine game, I'll use Shadow Pea, you win. Nuke Radio, we make your eardrums bleed. As for Big Wave Beach, there's not really much of a story here that would be interesting to tell. Many of the difficult levels ended up being done in one try, since nothing in this world really counters the plants in this family besides Fisherman Zombie, who can be very easily dispatched by Dusklobber. It did get pretty tedious at the end of the world, having to micromanage all of the plants in day 30 to make sure the Guacodiles never got hooked, but besides that, this was pretty easy. Moving on. This family scares me a lot. Okay, so before we even get into discussing how this family went, let me just say that out of almost every family in the game, Containment surprisingly has a really good chance to win. This is one of those plant families that has a ton of really cheap plants, especially the stalling kind. Stallia, Gravebuster, Buttercup, Tomb Tangler, the list goes on. Considering how we're going into Dark Ages, some of these plants end up actually being useful for just this one occasion. So, how does this family fare in the first world? Well, Dark Ages is not ideal, but I did learn a ton about this family while recording footage for the video. First of all, our newest new plant, which is not Doom-shroom, is surprisingly really busted, though sadly its projectiles get slung back at it by jesters. Still though, I love this spider for existing. I also found out how good Buttercup is at level 1. See, here's some lore for ya about myself. Buttercup is one of the only premium plants I have on my iPhone account, and it's at like level 5 or 6. So it's pretty broken there, and I wrote off the first level because I didn't think it was good. I was wrong. It can tank quite a few hits, and giving it plant food will give it all of its HP back. That's filthy. And unbelievably, this family can actually clear most of this world with little to no problem. That shocks me so much. You have no idea how insane that is. I ended up using Buttercup and Tomb Tangler for most levels. Tomb Tangler! That thing! This is the only time you will ever hear me say these words, but Tomb Tangler is kind of okay. Alright, moving forward. I did struggle a little bit on some of the other levels here, but for the most part, it all went pretty swimmingly. Somehow. Thank you PVZ2 for making this family as big as it is. I can't even begin to discuss how much stalling I had to do to make the world work, but it was worth it. This video idea would have gone hard if I had the foresight for it. And I think I did. I'm writing this after playing Big Wave Beach. I'm so tired. This world took forever to get through. Even the first few levels were a complete slog. And honestly, that's a really big shame, because this family is highlighted best when every plant becomes usable, for the most part. And listen, don't get me wrong, there were definitely some difficult levels in this world, but still, it was all possible, and in a pretty satisfying way. You know, Containment, I may not give your family too much credit, but you're pretty damn strong where it counts, and I respect that hustle immensely. So yeah, I completed this world with mostly no issues, which I consider to be a pretty big win. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Containment somehow beats PVZ2 on its own. Good job, support plants. You guys honestly deserve it. You do so much for us. Stand proud, Containment. You were strong. This family, on the other hand, yeah, I would prefer not to disclose what ended up happening to Gojo when he said I'd win, because that's basically this family's situation. Enchant-mint is a family that, admittedly, hasn't ever really been that great. There's some pretty useful plants in this family, such as Imitator and Power Lily, as well as Hypno-shroom and Levitator too, but that's kind of the problem. There's really only one plant that physically attacks zombies, Soybean Pod, and that plant costs more than 100 sun. So we need the sun out of the gravestones to place those, and I think you're beginning to see the problem. Now listen, it's not like there aren't ways around that restriction, but it's still kind of annoying. Though luckily, Enchant-mint only needs one good gamble to get the ball rolling in this world, and that's due to one single saving grace. Hypnotized zombies eat gravestones. And believe it or not, but that actually gives these plants a chance, since I tried so hard, but 2 levitators is not enough to solo the world. But with an enchantment, that could change the circumstances. So I tried playing a couple of the difficult levels in this world, and how did that go? Well, I actually beat them. I don't know how either. Every level here was a genuine struggle, especially nights 7 and 14. You wouldn't think that the Sunbeam level was difficult until you have to micromanage your luck. That's gross, I hate this. But yeah, it's very possible, provided that you're a masochist or you just want to get a video out on time. Listen, I'll deal with a lot to make that happen, except for Big Wave Beach. Yeah, okay, let's talk about this one. Most levels here are possible, just incredibly slow. And I'm not gonna lie, my patience was running thin with these plants. Which leads me to the sad reality of day 30 breaking me. See, Levitator is one of the very few plants in the game that's too low for fisherman zombies to grab on land. It's also our least expensive plant besides Shrinking Violet, which also has that trait. I think you can see where I'm going with this one. Once more than 2 fishermen appear on the screen, we lose. And believe me, I tried a lot to make this level happen. I wanted to make it possible because, I mean, it's enchantment. This family deserves it, even if I don't like it. But maybe I just don't have the patience for it because I threw in the towel. Out of every family that I consider failed in this video, this one's the most likely to actually beat PVZ2 on their own. But if I'm being real, I don't have the drive to see it through. Moving on. Okay, this is a pretty unique bunch. The family might initially seem lackluster, since the mint does nothing crazy useful, and most of the plants cost 125 sun or more, but we have a secret trick up our sleeves. Celery Stalker. Wow, never thought I'd be using this plant for a video. But yeah, this is basically the only reason why we're even discussing the family. So, how do these levels go with our little friend here in mind? Terribly! I misled you guys. Sorry. Let me explain why Dark Ages is impossible before I go any further. So yes, Celery Stalker is theoretically our best plant for the challenge because it A, has a low sun cost, B, has a plant food effect that multiplies it, and C, is overall pretty strong, but the problem is that it doesn't target gravestones at all. That's goofy. This family almost had a chance, and I personally would have loved to see it work out in the end, but sadly the line is drawn here. Let's continue. This family is so interesting. You have no idea how much I wanted this family to succeed in the video. For reference, the Enlighten-mint family actually has a few attacking plants, and while they can't destroy gravestones for the most part, they can overall succeed simply because they're all sun producers. Even the mint itself does nothing but provide sun, which kinda rocks. And sadly, I think you know where I'm going with this based on my tone. This family failed before getting the Dark Ages. As a matter of fact, it fails in ancient Egypt, and do you want to know how? Let's play the Last Stand level, and I'll show you. Yeah, it doesn't work. I can't even begin to explain how upsetting this was to me when I found out about it. It makes perfect sense, even for plants like Toadstool, because in the end, eating a zombie provides more sun, so it adds up. But come on, that's such a bummer. What's even worse is that at one point in time, Solar Sage was actually placeable in these levels. But realistically, if we have to rely on one patch to give this family any chance of winning, we're bending the rules way too much. Sadly, we'll have to continue onwards. This one hurts. Okay, so Fila-mint is a bizarre family. Despite the group not seeming too unusual, we have a lot of oddballs here that don't really do much damage, and I think that ends up contributing to why they can't actually beat the game on their own. See, Buzz Button is basically the only plant we could place down in the level with no sunstones, but let's ignore that part for a second here. How would we even break the gravestones? Simple answer? Can't. Well, not without some insane luck, but I think I've had my fill with gambling in this video. I had to watch levitators fling zombies for like 3 hours, and I've hit my limit. So you know what? The mint here is pretty trash too. We're just gonna say that this family can't get past Dark Ages and move on with our lives. This was another family that I was honestly pretty interested in. Despite it coming across as a family with literally no chance of success, Ghost Pepper actually breaks gravestones, so our only concern with the plants is how powerful Peppermint is, along with the only problem levels being the ones with no sunstones at all. And sadly, I don't think these are possible unless you get insane RNG. What a surprise! This one kinda sucks, because I really like the family, but I mean, so what if I can't beat Dark Ages? It does incredibly well elsewhere. Moving on. No. Okay, let me at least clarify why. So this family has a mint that doesn't kill any zombies unless you have a blover. And on top of this, the only attacking plant in the family that costs 100 sun or less is a brand new face that, frankly, cannot deal with every zombie on the board. So yeah, there's no real point to talking about this family if you can't even get the sun from gravestones. Tough luck. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our little experiment here, and this family is deceptive. Like, at first you don't think they stand much of a chance because every plant in this family costs a minimum of 100 sun, except for Spearmint itself. And guess what? It completely cheeses Dark Ages by spawning 5 spike rocks. Do some basic math on how much sun you can get when you shovel them up, and yeah, Spearmint beats Dark Ages incredibly efficiently. Big Wave Beach is also no trouble because with some natural sun in the sky, you can imagine that the likes of Pokra, Heathseeker, Laserbeam, Aquavine, and more can easily beat this world. The hardest level here was day 28, and even then, it's pretty damn easy. Yeah, I don't think this family shocks anyone, not when it has this many heavy hitters in it. I would almost say this family could even beat the world without lily pads, but I'm not going to indulge in those twisted thoughts. Let's instead go to the final family in PVZ2. I'm pretty mixed on how I feel about this family normally, because it has both the most broken plant in the game and some of the weakest. But unfortunately, I think you can see the sun costs here, and yeah. Wintermint doesn't exactly have any legs to stand on. If you could get one ice room down in a level, that would basically beat Dark Ages. But sadly, that won't happen unless you level up the plant extensively, which isn't exactly what I'm aiming for. So yeah, Wintermint can't compete. And I guess that leads me to the final part of this video. So, what are my ending thoughts on this topic? Well, first of all, the plant families in PVZ2 are pretty unique, and some of the circumstances that lead to any of these families being able to beat the adventure mode on their own shows just how insane power creep has gotten in the game in recent years. That's a topic that's been discussed time and time again on YouTube, so you don't need to hear it from me, but it's still worth noting. Though honestly, I think the bigger takeaway from this hypothetical is that these results are not indicative of what's possible with these families at all. Many of the best plants in the game sit in the families that couldn't compete in this video, and not to mention that just because you can't make a fair challenge out of these families, doesn't mean that you can't make an interesting one. Keep in mind that one of the most popular challenges ever done on this game was made possible with the creation of a new plant called a sun nut. Be for real! If you're somebody who ever wants to make PvZ content, here's a heads up. The results of your idea don't matter as long as you make it interesting and fun to watch. And with that, I think I'll end this video here. This was a long one, and admittedly, I'm pretty burnt out on PVZ2 now. I don't see myself playing this game for at least a few months moving forward, unless it's for a special reason. But with that being said, what are your thoughts on this video? Do you think some families deserve to be given a second chance? Do you not? Tell me your thoughts and more in the comments down below. And finally, we gotta do our member shoutouts, and this is starting to get difficult to alphabetically order, so I just won't. We'll go in order of longest lasting members to newest. Big thanks to Dan B, Nicholas Van Koski, Glitch into Code 867, Dust Belief Papyrus, Envious, Mop, GNVS, Ethan the Werewolf, Young Cato, Sploob, Clintuck, Microwave, Plagued, Beeben, The Silases, Francisco Moro, Song, Sad Monkey, Superior Nos, Gaming Within, Mystic Haze Champions, Lord 09910, Rediroe XDD, Tails Gimmer, Harder DK, Emerald, and Lethal Drama. There are so many of you now. Alongside my normal members, thank you all so much for your continued support. And now, as for me here, I'm gonna not jump scare you just because it's basically Halloween. Peace. While the stream crashed, I found this image on my desktop. I'm not gonna put it in what?
Sing it's everyday bro no cojones.
Okay, so it's everyday bro with the Disney Channel flow, 5 mil on YouTube in 6 months, never done before, got